Story 1. Lady Jane Grey, the 9-Day Queen. This is a true story. It happened in England. In the year 1553. A 16-year-old girl lived in a big house. Her name was Jane, Lady Jane Grey. She was not a princess, but she was very smart. She could read Greek and Latin. She loved books more than parties. She was quiet and kind. But England was in trouble. The king was dying. His name was Edward. He was only 15. He had no son, no daughter. The next in line was his sister Mary, but Mary was Catholic. And England was now Protestant. The rich lords were scared. If Mary became queen, she would bring back the old religion, maybe start a war. So they made a secret plan. The most powerful lord was John Dudley. He was called the Duke of Northumberland. He had a son named Guilford. He forced Jane to marry Guilford. Jane did not want to marry. She cried for 3 days, but no one listened. They wanted her bloodline to connect to the throne. Then King Edward died on July 6, 1553. Before he died, the lords made him sign a paper. The paper said, Jane will be queen, not Mary. It was illegal. But the lords had the army. On July 10th, soldiers came to Jane's house. They told her, "You are now Queen of England." Jane fell to the ground. She cried. She said, "I am not fit to be queen." But they put a royal robe on her. They took her to the Tower of London. That is where kings and queens lived. For 9 days, Jane was queen. But she had no power. The lords told her what to do, what to sign. She was a puppet. The people of England did not cheer for her. They waited. They wanted Mary, the true heir. Mary was hiding, but she sent letters. She said, "I am the true queen." Thousands of people joined her. Farmers, soldiers, lords. They marched to London. The same lords who made Jane queen. They got scared. They left Jane alone. They rode to meet Mary. They said, "We are sorry. You are the queen." On July 19th, just 9 days later, Jane was no longer queen. Soldiers came to the tower. They took her crown. They said, "You are under arrest." Jane was now a prisoner. In the same room where she was queen, Queen Mary entered London. The people cheered. Mary was queen now. At first, Mary did not want to kill Jane. Mary knew Jane was innocent. Jane was just a girl, used by powerful men. Mary put Jane in prison, maybe for life, but she did not want her dead. But Jane's father was a fool. His name was Henry Grey. In February 1554, he joined another rebellion. He tried to overthrow Queen Mary again. He failed. He was caught. Now Queen Mary was angry. She thought, "If I keep Jane alive, people will keep using her. They will keep fighting for the throne." So Mary signed the paper. The paper said, "Execute Lady Jane Grey." February 12, 1554. A cold morning. Jane was 17 years old. She wore a black dress. She walked to the scaffold. It was inside the tower, a private place, not for the public. She was calm. She carried a prayer book. She gave it to a man. She said, "Please give this to my sister." She spoke to the people there. She said, "I am innocent of trying to take the crown. I only accepted it because others made me." I ask all Christians to pray for me." Then she knelt. She said, "Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit." She tied a cloth over her eyes. She felt for the wooden block. She said, "What shall I do? Where is it?" A man helped her. She put her head down. Then it was over. One swing of the axe. A girl who loved books, who never wanted power, was queen for 9 days, and died because of it. That is the true story of Lady Jane Grey. Story 2. And Boleyn, the queen who lost her head. This is a true story. About love, about power, and about betrayal. It happened in England, in the year 1536. There was a king. His name was Henry, King Henry VIII. He was big. He was loud. He had a red beard. He was married to a queen. Her name was Catherine. She was from Spain. She was a good queen. The people loved her. But she could not give Henry a son. She had many babies, but only one lived, a daughter named Mary. Henry wanted a son to be king after him. Then Henry met a young woman at his court. Her name was Anne. And Boleyn. She was not the most beautiful, but she was smart. She was funny. She could dance. She could talk about politics and religion. Henry fell in love. He wanted to marry Anne, but he was already married to Catherine. In those days, only the Pope in Rome could allow a divorce. Henry asked the Pope. The Pope said no. Catherine was the aunt of the most powerful king in Europe. The Pope was scared of him. So for 6 years, Henry waited. And waited too. She refused to sleep with Henry. She said, "I will not be your mistress. I will only be your wife, your queen." Henry was angry. So he made a new church, the Church of England. He said, "I am the head of this church now, not the Pope." His new church gave him a divorce. In 1533, he married Anne. Secretly, she was pregnant already. In September, she had a baby. But it was a girl, not a son. They named her Elizabeth. Henry was disappointed, but he still loved Anne and was queen for 3 years. The people did not like her. They called her names. They said she was a witch because she had a small extra finger and a mark on her neck. They said she used dark magic to trap the king and was not a witch. She was just smart, and she spoke her mind. That was dangerous for a woman in those days, and got pregnant again. But the baby died. It was a boy. Henry was very sad and very angry. He started looking at other women. One woman was Jane Seymour. She was quiet. She was obedient, the opposite of Anne. Henry's advisors saw this. They hated him too, because Anne was trying to change England. She wanted to give church money to the poor. The advisors wanted the money for themselves. So they made a plan. They told the king, "Anne is cheating on you," with 5 men, including her own brother. It was a lie, but Henry believed it. Or maybe he wanted to believe it, so he could marry Jane Seymour. On May 2nd, 1536, soldiers arrested Anne. They took her to the Tower of London, the same tower where Lady Jane Grey would die later. They put Anne on trial. The judges were her enemies. The witnesses lied. Her own uncle spoke against her. They found her guilty of adultery, of treason, of witchcraft. The punishment was death, by fire, or by the axe. But Henry had some mercy. He hired a special executioner from France, a man who used a sword. It was faster, less painful. May 19th, 1536, the morning of her death, and woke up early. She prayed. She wrote a letter to the king. She said, "I am innocent, but I forgive you." She wore a gray dress with a red underskirt, red for courage. She walked to the scaffold. She was calm. She was not crying. She spoke to the crowd. She said, "Good Christian people, I am come here to die, according to the law. and I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you. For a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never. She was lying. To protect her daughter, Elizabeth. If she said the king was evil, they might kill Elizabeth too. She took off her hood. She tucked her hair under a cap. She knelt down. She said, "To Jesus Christ I commend my soul." She repeated it. Then the French swordsman stepped forward. He called out, "Bring me the sword," and turned her head, thinking he was still far away. In that moment, he swung. One fast cut. It was over. The Queen of England was dead. She was 35 years old. The next day, King Henry married Jane Seymour. 11 days later, Jane gave him a son, but Jane died after childbirth. The son became King Edward, the same boy who would later make Lady Jane Grey queen for 9 days. And the baby girl Elizabeth, the daughter of and Boleyn, she grew up and became one of the greatest queens in history, Queen Elizabeth I. And lost her head, but her daughter ruled for 45 years. That is the true story of Anne Boleyn. Story 3. Mary, Queen of Scots, the queen with 3 crowns. This is a true story about a queen who was born a queen, who wore 3 crowns, and died on one block. It happened in Scotland, France, and England. In the 1500s, Mary was born in December 1542 in a cold castle in Scotland. 6 days later, her father died, the King of Scotland. So Mary, a 6-day-old baby, became Queen of Scotland. She was too small to wear a crown, so others ruled for her. Scotland was at war with England. The King of England wanted baby Mary to marry his son, so England and Scotland could become one country. But the Scottish lords said no. They sent Mary away to keep her safe. When she was 5 years old, they put her on a ship and sent her to France. France was beautiful. The French king loved Mary. She was pretty. She was tall. She spoke 6 languages. She married the French prince. His name was Francis. When Francis's father died, Francis became King of France. So at 17 years old, Mary was Queen of Scotland and Queen of France. 2 crowns. But then, Francis got sick. He had an infection in his ear. After 1 year of marriage, he died. He was 16. Mary was a widow at 18. She was Queen of France no more. The new king was Francis's brother, a 10-year-old boy. His mother took power. She did not like Mary. So Mary sailed back home, to Scotland. After 13 years in France, Scotland had changed. The people were now Protestant, but Mary was Catholic, like her cousin, Queen Elizabeth of England. Elizabeth was the daughter of Anne Boleyn. Remember her? The people of Scotland did not trust Mary. They thought she would bring back the Catholic Church. They thought she was a spy for France. Mary was beautiful, and she needed a husband, a strong husband, to help her rule. She chose her cousin, Lord Darnley. He was tall. He was handsome. He also had a claim to the English throne. But Darnley was a bad man. He was jealous. He was a drunk. He thought Mary loved her secretary more than him. The secretary was Italian, named David Rizzio. One night, Darnley came to Mary's room with a group of lords. Mary was having dinner. She was 6 months pregnant. Darnley held Mary. The lords stabbed David Rizzio 56 times in front of Mary. The blood spilled on her dress. Mary did not scream. She was brave, but she never forgave Darnley. A few months later, Mary had a son named James. One day, James would be King of Scotland and England, but Darnley was still a problem. One night, there was an explosion at Darnley's house. The house blew up. Darnley was found dead in the garden. He was not burned. He was strangled. People said Mary did it, or her new lover did it. Her new lover was James Hepburn, the Earl of Bothwell. He was strong. He was ugly, but he protected Mary. 3 months after Darnley died, Mary married Bothwell. The people were shocked. They said, "She married her husband's killer." The Scottish lords raised an army. They captured Mary. They put her in prison, on an island, in a lake. They forced her to give up her crown to her 1-year-old son, James. Then they let her go. She ran away to England. She thought her cousin, Queen Elizabeth, would help her. But Elizabeth was scared. Mary was also Catholic. Mary also had a claim to the English throne. Many Catholics in England wanted Mary to be queen instead of Elizabeth. So Elizabeth put Mary in prison. For 19 years, Mary lived in different castles. She was a prisoner, but she lived like a queen. She had servants. She sewed. She wrote letters. But Mary wrote secret letters. She wrote to the King of Spain. She wrote to the Pope. She said, "Help me. Kill Elizabeth. Make me Queen of England." The letters were secret, but Elizabeth's spies found them. They showed the letters to Elizabeth. Now Elizabeth had proof. Mary wanted her dead. They put Mary on trial. She said, "I am a queen. You cannot put me on trial." But they found her guilty of treason. The punishment was death. Elizabeth did not want to sign the paper. For 3 months, she waited, because killing a queen was dangerous. What if other kings killed her? But her advisors said, "You must do it, or Mary's friends will kill you." February 8th, 1587. Fotheringhay Castle. Mary was 44 years old. She walked to the hall. She wore a black dress, but under it, she wore a red dress. Red, the color of Catholic martyrs. She knew she would die for her faith. She carried a cross. She carried a prayer book. She spoke. She said, "I am a queen, and a cousin to a queen. I die for my religion." She took off her black dress. She stood in the red dress. The executioner was nervous. He missed with the first swing. The axe hit the back of her head. She cried out, "Jesus!" The second swing cut her neck, but not all the way. The third swing finally took her head off. Then something strange happened. The executioner picked up her head to show the crowd, but it was a wig. Her real hair was short and gray. Her head fell to the floor, and her little dog, a small terrier, crawled out from under her skirt. It had been hiding there. It was covered in blood. It would not leave her body. Mary died, but her son, James, became king. When Queen Elizabeth died with no children, James became King of England too. So Mary's blood still sits on the throne today. That is the true story of Mary, Queen of Scots. Story 4. Marie Antoinette, the queen who lost everything. This is a true story about the last queen of France, who was called Madame Deficit. The people hated her. They said she was evil. They said she said, "Let them eat cake." But she never said that. It happened in France. In the 1790s, Marie was born in Austria. In 1755, her mother was the empress. Marie was the 15th child. She was a princess. She had a happy childhood. She loved music. She loved dogs. She was not very smart at school, but she was charming. When she was 14, her mother sent her to France to marry the future king. His name was Louis. He was 15. He was shy. He was fat. He liked to hunt and to make locks. He did not like to talk to people. Marie arrived at Versailles, the biggest palace in the world, with gold walls and giant gardens and 1,000 rooms. She married Louis. The people of France cheered. They thought she was beautiful, like a doll. But Marie was lonely. Louis did not love her at first. He did not even sleep in her room for 7 years. The people laughed at her. They wrote dirty songs about her. Then Louis's father died. In 1774, Louis became King Louis XVI. Marie was now Queen of France. She was 19 years old, the most powerful woman in France. But she had no power. The king made all the decisions, or his advisors did. France was in debt. They had spent too much money on wars, including helping America fight England. The poor people had no bread. The price of bread was too high. But Marie spent money, a lot of money, on dresses, on diamonds, on a small farmhouse she built, where she pretended to be a milkmaid. She dressed in simple clothes and played with sheep, while real farmers were starving. The people saw this, and they hated her. They made up lies about her. They said she sent all of France's money to Austria, to her brother. They said she had many lovers. It was not true, but the newspapers printed it. There was a famous scandal about a diamond necklace. A thief tricked a cardinal. The thief used Marie's fake signature. The cardinal thought the queen wanted the necklace. He bought it for millions, but Marie never ordered it. But the people believed she did. They called her Madame Deficit because she made the deficit worse. In 1789, the people had enough. They were starving. They stormed a prison called the Bastille. It was the start of the French Revolution. The people wanted to kill the king and queen. Louis and Marie tried to escape. In 1791, they dressed as servants. They rode in a plain carriage. But Louis was recognized because his face was on the money. Soldiers caught them and brought them back to Paris as prisoners. In 1792, the revolutionaries ended the monarchy. No more king, no more queen. Louis was put on trial. They found him guilty of treason. In January 1793, they took him to the guillotine, a new machine for cutting off heads. It was fast. The crowd cheered when his head fell. Marie was now called the Widow Capet, not a queen, just a normal woman, a prisoner. They put her in a small, dark cell. They took her son away. He was 8 years old. They tried to teach him to hate his mother. They told him to say she did bad things to him. It was a lie, but they used it at her trial. In October 1793, they put Marie on trial. The crowd screamed at her. They called her names. They said she was a monster. She said little. She just said, "I was a queen, and you took my crown. A wife, and you killed my husband. A mother, and you took my children. My blood alone remains. Take it, but do not make me suffer long." They found her guilty. On October 16th, 1793, they put her in a cart. A dirty, open cart, not a royal carriage. The people threw mud at her. They screamed. She was 37 years old. Her hair was white from stress. She was once the most fashionable woman in Europe. Now she wore a simple white dress and a white cap. She walked up the steps to the guillotine. She stepped on the executioner's foot. By accident. Her. Part 1. What happened to medieval queens who couldn't produce an heir? Drifting back into the stone corridors, where the candles flicker, and the fate of entire. Exhausted queen can, so settle in. Let your thoughts loosen a little. Marriages were political transactions. Could, or could not, deliver. Hey everyone, tonight we're in drafty bedchambers of medieval Europe. The tapestries smell faintly of smoke and damp wool. Kingdoms rests on whether one. Produce a healthy baby boy. Dim the lights, and together, we'll wander into a world where crowns were heavy, and women were judged almost entirely by what they. In the nursery, it was, in many ways, a deeply unfair arrangement. A king could be lazy, cruel, impulsive, astonishingly unhygienic, and perhaps built like a sack of wet grain. But if the royal cradle remained empty, many people would still glance politely toward the queen, because naturally it had to be her fault, comma. In the medieval imagination, queens were expected to be graceful, pious, obedient, and above all fertile, comma. Their bodies were treated less like their own and more like highly decorated state property. Their primary duty was to turn uncertain dynasties into secure ones by producing sons in reliable quantities, ideally several, comma. 1 son was good, 2 was better, comma. 3 was considered excellent, if only because medieval children had a remarkable tendency to disappear from the historical record before reaching adulthood. Disease was everywhere. Fevers came and went like uninvited guests. Physicians applied leeches with serene confidence, and the survival rate of royal children was often little better than anyone else's, despite all the velvet and ceremony, which meant queens spent much of their lives pregnant, recovering from pregnancy, praying to become pregnant, or being quietly blamed for not becoming pregnant quickly enough. A soothing existence. If you enjoy chronic anxiety, at first glance, becoming queen may seem glamorous. Fine gowns, golden crowns, elaborate banquets where someone else carved the swan. But beneath the surface, the role could be terrifyingly precarious. A queen's position depended on her usefulness, and usefulness was measured in heir, not daughters, generally speaking. Daughters were appreciated in a polite and somewhat distracted way. They could be married off to form alliances, which was helpful. But sons were the true objective. Sons inherited thrones, led armies, and reassured nervous nobles that the kingdom would not descend into chaos. The moment the king developed a cough, without a male heir, every meal at court came with an invisible layer of tension. Nobles whispered. Foreign ambassadors wrote cautious letters home. And the queen, despite her jewels and titles, became increasingly vulnerable. Let's drift for a moment into one such royal bedchamber. The queen kneels beside her bed, praying softly to the Virgin Mary. She has already endured miscarriages. Perhaps several infants were born and died within days. Her ladies-in-waiting move quietly nearby. Physicians offer strange advice involving herbs, bloodletting, and strongly held opinions. Everyone is waiting, not for peace, not for prosperity, for a son. And if that son does not arrive, the consequences can be severe. A queen might lose influence at court. She might be replaced by younger favorites. She might be sent to a convent, divorced if the church could be persuaded, or simply treated as a beautiful diplomatic error. In some cases, she remained queen in name, but lived in a state of ceremonial disappointment, which sounds exhausting. To understand why this mattered so much, we need to remember that medieval monarchy was built on continuity. A kingdom was not an abstract institution. It was a family business with unusually ornate hats. If the king died without a clear heir, rival claimants appeared almost immediately. Cousins emerged from distant castles. Uncles developed sudden ambitions. Foreign rulers expressed concern in the least helpful possible way by invading. Civil wars were common, and so the queen's womb became, in effect, a matter of national security. No pressure. People developed elaborate theories about conception. Some believed fertility depended on balancing bodily humors. Others recommended particular foods, pilgrimages, relics, or prayers. Sacred belts were worn. Saints were petitioned. Astrologers consulted the stars with impressive confidence and mixed results. If pregnancy failed to occur, blame generally settled on the queen. This was medically questionable. But medieval society was not especially interested in modern reproductive science. We now know infertility can originate with either partner, or with both, or with factors no one fully understands. Medieval observers, however, rarely paused to wonder whether the king himself might be the issue. That would have been awkward. Far easier to suggest that the queen was somehow deficient, despite the fact that her husband may have spent his youth jousting, drinking heavily, contracting illnesses, and eating enough roasted meat to alarm a contemporary cardiologist. Still, the queen was expected to smile serenely and continue praying. One of the most famous examples is Catherine of Aragon. Although technically she belongs to the early, modern period rather than the Middle Ages, her story captures the ancient royal problem with heartbreaking clarity. Catherine was the daughter of the formidable Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon. She was intelligent, devout, politically skilled, and by most accounts exceptionally dignified. She married Henry VIII, who at the time was handsome, athletic, and not yet the thunderous figure remembered from later portraits. For a while, things seemed promising. Catherine conceived multiple times, but pregnancy after pregnancy ended in tragedy, miscarriages, stillbirths, infants who survived only briefly. One daughter, Mary I of England, lived to adulthood, but no surviving son appeared. And Henry, whose self-confidence remained robust under nearly all circumstances, decided the marriage itself was the problem. Naturally, he concluded this after years of benefiting from Catherine's loyalty. He sought an annulment, argued that their union offended divine law, and eventually broke with the Catholic Church when permission was not granted. This was an unusually dramatic response to marital dissatisfaction. Catherine was stripped of her status, separated from her daughter, and forced to live in increasingly isolated circumstances. She never stopped insisting she was England's true queen, and history has largely agreed with her. Her tragedy was not barrenness, because she was not barren. She conceived repeatedly. Her tragedy was that medieval and early modern biology offered no guarantees, and the one child the kingdom demanded happened not to survive. That was enough to unravel her life. But long before Catherine, medieval queens faced similar dangers. Consider Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most extraordinary women in European history. Eleanor married Louis VII of France in the 12th century. Louis was intensely pious and somewhat ill-suited to worldly matters. One gets the impression that he would have been happier organizing monastery accounts. Eleanor, by contrast, was charismatic, wealthy, and politically astute. Together they produced two daughters, perfectly healthy, intelligent daughters, but no son. This became a serious problem for the France kingdom, which preferred its succession less imaginative and more male. The marriage deteriorated. Personal incompatibility played a role, as did the lingering issue that Louis and Eleanor seemed to possess entirely different temperaments. Their union was annulled in 1152, officially on grounds of consanguinity. This was a common medieval solution. Many noble couples were related, because Europe's ruling families treated the family tree more like a tightly knotted shrub. If a marriage needed to end, church lawyers could often locate a sufficiently tangled branch. Soon afterward, Eleanor married Henry II of England. With remarkable efficiency, she produced 8 children, including 5 sons. So it turned out the fertility issue may not have been Eleanor. An awkward revelation for Louis, though by then the paperwork was complete. And because history has a fondness for irony, Eleanor's second marriage helped create the Angevin Empire and reshaped Western Europe, all because one queen, once quietly judged for not producing a son, was given another opportunity. Part 2. What happened to Viking women when their husbands died? Let's drift north now, away from the candlelit courts of queens and anxious dynasties, toward the colder edges of early medieval Europe. The air sharpens, the sea grows dark and metallic. Long ships rest along the shore like sleeping wooden creatures, their dragon heads staring patiently into the mist. Nearby, turf-roofed halls glow with firelight, while cloaks hang drying by the hearth. Someone is repairing a shield. Someone else is arguing over inheritance. Because even in the age of Vikings, paperwork, whether carved into memory or law, had a way of following people everywhere. And tonight, we are not following the warriors. We are following the women they left behind. Popular imagination tends to present Viking women as either fierce shield maidens striding into battle or silent figures waiting faithfully by the fjord. The truth, as usual, is more practical and far more interesting. Viking women were often responsible for the entire household economy. They managed farms, supervised workers, arranged marriages, oversaw food stores, and kept families functioning while husbands traveled to trade, raid, or disappear for several years in pursuit of silver and questionable decisions, which meant that when a husband died, his widow was not necessarily cast into helpless ruin. Quite often, she became more powerful. This was one of the more surprisingly flexible features of Viking Age society. In much of Scandinavia, women had legal rights that were notable for the period. Not modern, certainly. No one was drafting treatises on gender equality beside the Longhouse fire. But compared with many other societies of medieval Europe, Norse women could own property, inherit wealth, initiate divorce under certain conditions, and act as heads of households. A widow, therefore, was not simply a tragic figure in black wool. She was often the new manager of the estate, and possibly the only adult in the vicinity with any common sense. When a Viking husband died, whether in battle, at sea, from illness, or after one ambitious raid too, many, his property had to be distributed according to customary law. Sons inherited significant portions, but widows were usually entitled to retain their dowry and often received a share of the estate. If the children were young, the widow might control the farm until they came of age. This gave her real authority. She could oversee livestock, negotiate trade, hire labor, and defend her family's interests at local assemblies known as the Thing. The Thing, despite sounding like a placeholder word someone forgot to replace, was a formal gathering where disputes were settled and laws recited. It was part courtroom, part parliament, part community meeting, and almost certainly colder than everyone would have preferred. Widows could be represented by male relatives, but wealthy women also exerted influence directly, especially when land and inheritance were at stake. And land, as always, meant power. The daily realities of widowhood depended on status. A poor woman with few relatives might face hardship. Farming in the north required relentless labor, and winter had no interest in anyone's emotional state. But a high-status widow could become a formidable figure. She might control substantial property, arrange advantageous marriages for her children, and maintain political alliances. In a world where kinship and land ownership defined social standing, this was no small matter. The keys many Viking women wore at their belts were more than practical tools. Archaeologists often find these keys in female graves, and they symbolized authority over the household. When the husband died, the woman who already managed the stores, textiles, and domestic economy often became the undisputed center of the estate. The keys, in a sense, were now hers entirely. There is something quietly satisfying about that. Of course, Viking widowhood was not free from emotional and social pressures. Funeral customs could be elaborate. Some individuals were buried in ships. with weapons, jewelry, animals, and carefully chosen possessions. Arab traveler Ahmad ibn Fadlan described a dramatic funeral among the Rus, Norse-linked traders in Eastern Europe, involving ritual sacrifice and immense ceremony. His account is vivid, unsettling, and proof that human beings have always found highly theatrical ways to process grief. Yet beneath the spectacle lay a practical question. Who controls the property now? Often, the answer was the widow. Norse law codes written down later, such as the Gragas and other Scandinavian legal traditions, suggest that women retained recognized rights in marriage and inheritance. While the exact rules varied by region and century, the broader pattern is clear. Widows were legal actors, not merely passive dependents. They could remarry, of course, and many did. Marriage was as much an economic and political arrangement as a romantic one. A prosperous widow with land was an attractive match. Suitors were likely to appear with remarkable sympathy and very practical intentions. Still, remarriage was not always immediate or obligatory. A widow with sufficient resources could remain independent, managing her household in her own right. One can imagine the relative peace of such an arrangement. No husband returning from overseas with dubious business plans. No unexpected goats acquired through barter. Just the farm, the accounts, and the occasional inheritance dispute. Saga literature preserves several memorable women who reveal how much influence Norse widows and wives could wield. In Laxdala Saga and Jarl Saga, women negotiate marriages, encourage feuds, protect family honor, and make decisions with far-reaching consequences. They are rarely treated as decorative figures. More often, they are the strategic minds in rooms full of men with axes. Not every decision they made was peaceful, but it was certainly consequential. Widowhood could also bring vulnerability. Relatives might challenge inheritance claims. Ambitious kinsmen could attempt to seize control of property. Harsh weather and limited manpower posed constant risks. Even so, a widow with strong family, connections, and legal standing had meaningful tools to defend her position. This distinguishes Viking women from many of their contemporaries elsewhere in Europe, where widows could possess rights but often faced tighter legal and social constraints. In Norse society, the transition from wife to widow could increase rather than diminish a woman's authority. The husband's death was a personal loss, but also a transfer of responsibility and power. And so, in the smoky light of a longhouse, after the funeral feast has ended and the mourners have gone home, a widow gathers the household keys. The ships may still sail. The winter still approaches. The children still need feeding. The fields still demand work. But the estate endures. And at its center stands the woman who now directs it. History often lingers on kings, raiders, and men with dramatic nicknames. Yet many Viking communities survived because widows kept farms productive, preserved family wealth, and guided the next generation with practical intelligence. Not with swords, usually, with ledgers, alliances, and the calm ability to keep everyone alive until spring, which, in the North Atlantic world, was a form of heroism all its own. So if a Viking husband failed to return from sea, his widow did not necessarily fade into the background. She might inherit land. She might command labor. She might negotiate marriages and legal settlements. She might choose to remarry, or she might remain, keys at her belt, as the undisputed head of a thriving household, a quiet ruler of sheep, silver, and stubborn relatives. And as the fire settles into glowing embers and the fjord darkens outside, we can leave her there, steady, capable, and very likely more competent than most of the men whose names filled the sagas. Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt. This is a true story about the most famous queen in history. Her name was Cleopatra. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt. Cleopatra was born in the year 69 BC. That is over 2,000 years ago. She was not Egyptian. Her family was Greek. They ruled Egypt for 300 years. Her family had a bad habit. Brothers married sisters. To keep the bloodline pure. To keep the power. When Cleopatra was 18, her father died. He was the king. He left the throne to Cleopatra and her 10-year-old brother. His name was Ptolemy. The law said they must marry and rule together, brother and sister, husband and wife. Cleopatra did not like this, but she had no choice. Her brother was young, but his advisors were powerful. They hated Cleopatra because she was smart. She was ambitious. She could speak 9 languages. She was the first in her family to learn the Egyptian language. The people loved her for that. The advisors were scared. After 3 years, they kicked her out. They sent soldiers. Cleopatra ran away to Syria. Her brother was now the only king. He was 13, but Egypt was in trouble. Rome was the most powerful country in the world, and Rome wanted Egypt's money. Egypt had grain. Egypt had gold. A Roman general came to Egypt. His name was Julius Caesar. He was 52 years old. He was the most powerful man in the world. Cleopatra's brother thought, if I help Caesar, he will make me king forever. So the brother did something terrible. He killed Caesar's enemy and gave Caesar his head as a gift. But Caesar was angry. He said, "This is not Roman. This is not honorable." Cleopatra heard this. She was in Syria. She made a plan. She told her servant, "Roll me in a carpet." A big, beautiful carpet. The servant carried the carpet into the palace, into Caesar's room. In front of Caesar, he unrolled the carpet, and Cleopatra came out. She was 21 years old. She was smart. She was charming. Caesar fell in love. Caesar helped Cleopatra. He fought a war against her brother. Her brother drowned in the Nile River. He was 15. Now Cleopatra was the only queen. She ruled alone. She had a son with Caesar. His name was Caesarion, Little Caesar. Caesar took Cleopatra to Rome. The people of Rome were shocked because Caesar was already married to a Roman woman. But Caesar put a gold statue of Cleopatra in his temple, next to the goddess. Then, on March 15th, 44 BC, Caesar was killed in Rome by his own friends. They stabbed him 23 times. Cleopatra was scared. She ran back to Egypt with her son. Rome was now in chaos. There were many wars. Finally, 2 men won. One was Octavian, Caesar's adopted son. The other was Mark Antony, Caesar's best general. They split the Roman world. Octavian took the west. Antony took the east, including Egypt. Mark Antony came to Egypt to meet Cleopatra. She did not go to him. She made him come to her. She sailed on a golden boat with purple sails, with silver oars. Her servants were dressed as sea gods. She was dressed as the goddess Aphrodite. Music was playing. The smell of perfume filled the air. Antony saw her, and he forgot everything. He forgot Rome. He forgot his wife. He fell in love. Antony and Cleopatra ruled together. For 10 years, they had 3 children, twins, a boy and a girl, and another son. Antony gave Roman land to Cleopatra's children. This made Octavian very angry. Octavian was in Rome. He told the people, Antony is not Roman anymore. He is Egyptian now. He is under the spell of that woman. There was a great war at sea, called the Battle of Actium, in 31 BC. Antony had 500 ships. Octavian had 400 ships. But Octavian's ships were smaller and faster. In the middle of the battle, Cleopatra got scared. She took her 60 ships and sailed away, back to Egypt. Antony saw her leave, and he followed her. He left his army. He left his navy. He left the battle to be with her. Because of this, Octavian won. 1 year later, Octavian came to Egypt with his army. Antony thought Cleopatra was dead. Someone lied to him. So Antony fell on his sword. He killed himself. But he did not die right away. He was brought to Cleopatra. He died in her arms. She was now alone. Octavian captured her. He wanted to take her to Rome, in a parade, as a prisoner. The people would laugh at her, throw things at her. Cleopatra could not accept this. She was a queen. She was a goddess to her people. She would not be a slave. So she made a plan. She asked her servant to bring her a basket of figs. Hidden in the basket was a snake, a cobra, called an asp, a very poisonous snake from Egypt. On August 12th, 30 BC, Cleopatra dressed in her royal robes. She put on her crown. She lay on a golden couch. She let the snake bite her, on her arm, or her chest. No one knows for sure. Within minutes, she was dead. She was 39 years old. With her, the 300-year rule of her family ended. Egypt became part of Rome. Octavian became the first emperor of Rome. He was called Augustus. Cleopatra's son, Caesarion, was killed, so that no one could say he was the true son of Julius Caesar. That is the true story of Cleopatra, the queen who spoke to Caesar, who loved Antony, who chose death over shame, and became a legend. Princess Diana, the people's princess. This is a true story. It is not ancient history. It happened in our lifetime. About a princess who had everything and lost everything. Her name was Diana, Diana Spencer. She was born in 1961. In England, in a big house called Park House. Her family was close to the royal family, but they were not royal. Her father was an earl. Her mother was a daughter of a baroness. Diana had a normal childhood, but her parents fought a lot. When she was 8, they got divorced. It was very rare in those days. Diana was sad. She went to live with her father. Diana was not very good at school. She failed her exams twice. But she was good with children. She was kind. She had a warm smile. After school, she moved to London. She worked as a nanny. She took care of babies. She cleaned houses. She lived in a small flat with 3 friends. She was 19 years old. Then she met a prince. His name was Charles. Prince Charles. He was the son of Queen Elizabeth II. He was the future king of England. He was 32 years old, 13 years older than Diana. They had met a few times before, but now he was looking for a wife. The royal family wanted him to marry a good girl, a virgin, from a good family. Diana was perfect. They went on 12 dates. Then Charles asked her to marry him. In February 1981, Diana said yes. The whole world was watching. A reporter asked them, "Are you in love?" Diana said, "Of course." Charles said, "Whatever in love means." People thought it was a joke, but it was not. It was the truth. On July 29th, 1981, they got married in St. Paul's Cathedral in London. 750 million people watched on TV. It was the wedding of the century. Diana wore a huge dress with a 25-foot train. She was nervous. She got Charles's name wrong. She called him Philip Charles instead of Charles Philip. But no one cared. She looked like a fairy tale princess. But it was not a fairy tale. Charles was still in love with another woman. Her name was Camilla Parker Bowles. She was married to someone else. But Charles and Camilla had been together for years. Before he met Diana, and after he married Diana, Diana found out. She was heartbroken. Diana and Charles had two sons, William, born in 1982, and Harry, born in 1984. Diana was a great mother. She was different from other royals. She hugged her children. In public, she took them to McDonald's. She took them to theme parks. She wanted them to have a normal life. The people loved her for this. They called her the People's Princess. Diana also did something new. She touched sick people. In 1987, AIDS was a scary disease. People thought you could get it from a handshake, from a hug. Diana went to a hospital. She sat on the bed of a man with AIDS. She held his hand, without gloves. The picture went all over the world. It changed everything. She showed the world that AIDS patients were not dangerous. They needed love. But her marriage was falling apart. Charles and Diana were living separate lives. They fought. They were unhappy. In 1992, they separated. They did not divorce yet, but they lived apart. Diana was alone. The paparazzi followed her everywhere. Hundreds of photographers. Every day, every night. They sold her pictures for millions of dollars. She could not go anywhere. She could not have a private life. In 1995, Diana gave a TV interview to the BBC. She was honest. She said, "There were three of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." She meant Charles, her, and Camilla. The Queen was angry. After that interview, the Queen told them to divorce. In 1996, they did. Diana was no longer Her Royal Highness. She was just Diana, Princess of Wales. She lost her title, but she kept her apartment in Kensington Palace, and she kept her charity work. After the divorce, Diana was finally free. She dated a man named Dodi Fayed. He was an Egyptian film producer. His father owned Harrods department store in London and the Ritz Hotel in Paris. In August 1997, Diana and Dodi went on vacation on his yacht in the Mediterranean Sea. The paparazzi followed them on boats and helicopters. On August 30th, 1997, they flew to Paris. They had dinner at the Ritz Hotel. After midnight, they left the hotel through the back door to avoid photographers. They got in a black Mercedes car. Dodi was in the back with Diana. A bodyguard was in the front. The driver was named Henri Paul. He was the head of security at the Ritz. Photographers on motorcycles chased the car. The car was going very fast through the streets of Paris. It entered a tunnel called the Pont de l'Alma Tunnel. The driver lost control. The car crashed into a pillar at 65 miles per hour. Dodi died instantly. The driver died instantly. The bodyguard was badly hurt, but he lived. Diana was alive. She was trapped in the back seat. She was conscious. She was talking. She said, "My God, what's happened?" Photographers arrived first, before the ambulance. Some of them took pictures. Instead of helping, the ambulance came. They took her to the hospital. The doctors tried for 2 hours to save her, but her injuries were too bad. At 4 o'clock in the morning, on August 31st, 1997, Diana died. She was 36 years old. The world was shocked. The world was sad. Millions of people cried. They left flowers outside her home. At Kensington Palace, the pile of flowers was 5 feet high and half a mile long. Her funeral was on September 6th. 2 billion people watched on TV. Her brother gave a speech. He said, "She was the most hunted person of the modern age." After she died, many things changed. The royal family changed. They became more open, more human. Her sons, William and Harry, kept her memory alive. They do charity work, like their mother did. People still visit her grave, on a small island, in a lake, at her family's home. That is the true story of Princess Diana. She was not born a princess, but she became the queen of people's hearts. And then she was gone, too soon. This is the end of our stories. Thank you for listening. Sleep well. End.